my pastor, who I love and appreciated, started to preach against my ability to love myself.
Wow.
And I was not going to tithe into my own oppression. And so there's a pastor sitting next to you in this chair, and I'm that baby in that pew.
Yeah.
It's still something that vexes me. We know that Black young people, when they ask for help, seldom get it, which is in part where they stop asking for help or stop ringing the alarm. And we know if we play this all the way out, that the consequence is usually that they engage in self-harm. I could be fired if I were teaching in Florida and had a picture of my partner on my desk.
No way.
This is after a federal bill that said you actually can't do that because it is illegal with regard to employment discrimination.
Hey family, it's Dr. Jamal Bryant, and I want to welcome you to Let's Be Clear. I need you to do me a favor. Every member you know that goes to a Black church, I need them to tap in. All of your family members, I need you to tap in. This is one of the most critical conversations I have ever had recorded on this podcast that means so much for the culture, for the community, and for the church. It's so meaningful that I couldn't have this conversation with anybody. I needed my Morehouse brother to come in from Washington, D.C., so that we can have a dialogue. And let me say to you that I am laying on the panoply of psychology to be corrected, to be challenged, and to be checked. And I am standing really in place for the Black church. Doctor, he is newly minted, Dr. David Johns, NBJC.
Yeah.
And I have been in the same orbit. We have been in the same orbit, I'm going to say, since the Clinton administration.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, I was in the NAACP as National Youth and College Director. And I want to give some testimonies first, and then we'll go into a dialogue. This is not, we're going to deal with Trump later. We're going to deal with DEI later.
Okay.
I need to deal with LGBTQAI and the Black church is where I want to start.
Yep.
And I want to say it took me a journey to get to have this conversation. It is so necessary. My sister, Dr. Jamal Bryant, is a clinical psychologist at Pepperdine University and has really championed and challenged me to help get to this place. I'm going to give you two stories, Dave, before we ever have a conversation.
Thank you.
I was pastoring in Baltimore at Empowerment Temple. I had 3 services on Sunday. And in between my 3 services, 7:30, 9:30, 11:30, I go to the back door, shake hands with my members on their way out. And I go to the back door. I'll never forget this Sunday. And 2 young men were coming out. I hugged them. Said, love y'all. See you next week. That's all I'm saying. There ain't no real conversation. God bless you. Go in peace. And the young man, he could have been 20, 21. Said, Pastor, you don't love me. I said, I do. Well, what you mean? So you don't love me, I'm gay. And it hit me with a silver bullet inside of my head because I realized that I had been performing domestic terrorism, that he felt unloved by his own pastor. Put a mark there, Dr. John. Last summer, Bishop O.C. Allen invited me to come to his fellowship gathering to do a conversation on branding, on marketing. That's what he brought me for. It's a collection. I'm sorry, for those of you who don't know, is Bishop O.C. Allen oversees a collection of affirming churches, Black affirming churches. So I sit down, in the stage is maybe 700 people, 800 people there. I sit down, Dr. Johns, and look out in the audience. And on the second row is a young man who was a member of my church in Baltimore. At that time, I'd been in Atlanta for 4 years. So I stopped mid-conversation because this little boy had been with me since he was 11, 12.
One of your babies.
Yeah. And I said, we on a panel for 800 people. I said, hey, what you doing in Atlanta?
And I didn't know.
Yeah.
You ain't come by the church.
Yeah. You live here?
Yeah.
So he said, yeah. I said, how long you been here? He said, 3 years. I said, 3 years? And you haven't seen me once?
Yeah.
So he says, no, I'm at Bishop Allen's church. And I, David, apologized to him that I was such a pastor that he couldn't feel comfortable coming to his spiritual covering. I apologized to him for how I treated him, how the church treated him. And it went viral that I had forsaken the gospel.
Mm-hmm. To show up in love. How about that?
Yeah,
to show up in love.
Yeah, to show up in love and to embrace not even a stranger.
That's right.
At this point, he's maybe 27 years old. And I've been on the front line of any number of issues. I've interviewed Mr. Farrakhan, stood with Palestinians. I've dealt with the devastation in Haiti. I have never received the backlash I've received in my entire ministry as I did for that demonstration of love. I called Bishop Allen and I said, in a small measure, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, in a small measure, I felt like what it feels like to be gay for a day. Because it did not, the vitriol, the pushback came from Christians.
From your own.
Yes. The deacons asked me, hey, are we now a gay church? I said, we're a love church.
How about we just a church?
We're just a church. Yeah.
Right.
And so there's a million things we need to discuss today, but
I appreciate the grounding.
There's a million things that we have to speak today. But I found the disconnect that I fancied myself called in the arena of social justice and thought I could pick and choose. Really?
Yeah.
What justice looks like.
Yeah.
So I would march to the guillotine for Palestinians, and I've never been. I would march across waters to Haiti, where I do not live. But right here in my own country, my own community, I'm shrinking it as I go. In my own congregation, I was not exercising or modeling the love of Christ. And so I wanted you here. I don't know what the producers told you. I don't know what
they say, but your frat brother wants to have a conversation. I said, let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to have a conversation because I don't think the Black church has had one. And in this space, we're able to do it uninterrupted. I mean, there's nobody out in the crowd giving an objection. If you walk out, we won't know.
Just sit down, beloved. We'll come back to it.
Yes, I wanted to have a earnest conversation. And before you, I had an interview with a Black Republican.
It's hard.
Yes, it's amazing how we can stomach that. Come through now.
Yeah.
But I wanted
preach.
you to unpack. Let's not be Dr. Johns and Dr. Bryant.
Yeah.
I want to teleport us that you and I, and we can kick over a whole lot of things today. I'm telling you, those of you who are faint of heart, you ain't gonna be able to handle it. I wanted us to have a conversation as two Kappas.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
We got it's two noops. Let's do that.
As two
Let's
noops.
go.
Let's
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
And so this is gonna peel back bananas
Let's
and
go.
onions
At the same time.
because we got to deal with D9
Yep.
and the Black church
Yep.
and the social justice
Because
space.
it's all related.
I want you to talk to your brother. If I'm giving you a megaphone, to talk to the Black church.
Yep. Can I show? Let me say thank you.
Yeah.
One, for creating and holding the space, and for demonstrating the kind of love that too often we profess and desire to project, but don't know in intimate ways. Knowing the sting of stigma that you tasted in that moment, what's held you there? Right.
Yeah.
I imagine it's much easier to have said, "Oh, this water is too deep. It's a little too hot. Let me just shift and do something different." Yeah. Why did you make the decision to stay in solidarity, in community, and whatever?
Because I felt like it was right. And I'll say to you, when a lot of people talk about soul ties or generational curses, and they think soul ties are just sexual. Sometimes soul ties are ideological. And so a lot of what I spewed, I heard,
understood,
digested, adopted, and just took it to be that. I mean,
it's ecological.
Yes.
Yep.
And when I saw firsthand, again, it wasn't strangers. A lot of people can hide behind data. It's only 4% of the population or whatever that number
we know
is.
Of.
Yeah. Who have filled out the census report.
That part. Because I know a lot of people who do lots of things.
Yes.
And never have to explain it or declare it publicly.
Yes. And I felt like on the side of justice.
Yeah.
How was I making moral judgment as a divorcee, as an
human.
adulterer? No. I'm saying, so I took a false high ground.
Yeah.
Forget human. Yeah. Because a lot, we talk about there being two churches in America, the evangelical white church and then the Black church.
That's right.
I contend that there are three.
Okay. What's the third one?
We're going to label it today.
Okay.
It's non-denominational.
Okay.
Yeah, but okay. I think that for us to not have a church that says, come unto Jesus, is the same lie as the Statue of Liberty. Give me those who are yearning to breathe free.
It is all a lie for the pit of white mediocrity hell. 6 months ago, I would have said white supremacy, but words matter. Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, so many of our ancestors help us to appreciate that if we can name our conditions, we can then begin to change them. So I want to name a thing in that regard. It's about mediocrity. 3 points of connection. As the grandson of a Black Baptist preacher from Austin, Texas.
I didn't know
that. I have struggled with at least two things in this regard, which is our ability to have incomplete conversations about things that we know are true. Like sacredly, we know they are true.
Yeah.
And a part of how this usually manifests in us church folks joking, we know there are gay folks in the church, right? They're usually where? In the choir.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe on the liturgical praise dance team. And we will acknowledge that, we will celebrate it, and then we will enforce those boundaries, which is to say, you can come up in this church, but don't try it.
Yeah.
Don't bring too much of yourself.
Yes.
Don't bring your little friend up in here with you. Right? And I've always struggled with two things, and one is the consequence of us being compelled to go to Sunday school, and I should just step back and acknowledge that the church generally, the Black church more specifically, is both a site of incredible potential and power and tremendous pain for so many of us, especially those of us who identify as LGBTQIA+. You will
Yeah.
hear me use same gender loving.
Yes.
I don't use gay because gay is often a white male political identifier.
I suppose you
The
were going
things
to
that
check
people
me
think
today.
about
Yeah.
when they think about gay, they don't think about all this fabulousness, right?
Yes.
They don't think about a black
So
man
but
who
let
is
me
college
let me
educated.
pause you midpoint because you got to help us.
Yeah.
Even for the preachers, the appropriate terminology is what?
So I appreciate the question, and appropriate is relative, which is a part of why I know this vexes people who have language fatigue.
Yes.
There are a lot of folks who I engage with who feel like, look, I love you, you can do whatever you want to do, but it's too many terms. My brain can't wrap itself around the they, them, there.
Yeah.
And so I want to acknowledge that I'm complicating that by saying I got something else for you to train your tongue to pronounce.
Yes.
And so same gender loving is a term created by a black man.
Okay.
To acknowledge that what it means for us as descendants of Africa, who are the progenitors of everything, the creators of cool, but who have had to be forced to endure what black feminists refer to as the matrix of domination, the signs, systems, and symbols that allow white patriarchy and privilege to be upheld and omnipresent yet hyper invisible at the same time. Those things exist in language. And so Black folks have always struggled to find love, to have the ability to love ourselves, to have the ability to love each other, especially when we think about transatlantic and Pacific enslavement. And so same gender loving is a way for me as a queer Black man to say to everybody, I am proud of the journey of the complications, the joy associated with finding love. And for most Black people, we have to go through something in order to get to the point where we can love ourselves and find somebody else to love on us too. That's one part of it. The other part of it for me is we will recite scriptures. And what I know is that I was formed in my mother's womb by Jesus before I ever took my first breath. And it used to vex me when I acknowledged my superpower in terms of being queer. I just stop for a second and back up. And the ontological origins of the word queer means that which is not in a position of power. So us as Black folks in this country, we are queer. People with disabilities in a country that is ableist are queer. People for whom English is not their first language or this country that their parents are not native to, we are all queer. However, people have made it a synonym for sexual minority status. If only logically it doesn't work for me when people suggest that we are choosing an additional form of oppression, right? This is usually how it comes up in the church, which is, if that's a thought you have, ask God to pray it away.
Yes.
If that's a thought you have, suppress it and move beyond it. I would ask people until I was blue in the face in church on Sunday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, why would God make me this way? Just why? And if you can't answer that question for me, why can't you just show up in love?
Wow.
All this matters for me because we know the consequence of what happens when our babies aren't loved. Asa Hilliard is a sociologist, a Black man. He says, I've never met a child in particular, a Black child who is not a genius. There's no secret to how we support them. We first acknowledge them as human, and we second support them with love. How many Black babies do you know who have never known love?
A lot.
Too many.
Yeah.
And the consequence of that, especially for kids who identify as LGBTQIA+ or same gender loving, or more often, it's the case that kids are not adhering to gender expectations. They're not wearing dresses because that's what girls are supposed to do. They're not playing with balls and trucks because that's what boys are supposed to do. Typically, we're talking about folks not performing gender in ways that we expect for them to. But what the data shows is that the suicide rate for Black kids 10 to 27 increased 144% between 2007 and 2020. This is before the most recent pandemic. Based on the limited data we're able to collect, we know that those rates are even higher for kids who identify as or who are assumed to be LGBTQIA+. We know that Black young people, when they ask for help, seldom get it, which is in part why they stop asking for help or stop ringing the alarm. And we know if we play this all the way out, that the consequence is usually that they engage in self-harm. The suicide rates, the depression rates, every quality of life indicator you can think of with regard to mental health and well-being, our babies are at the lowest rungs of those ladders. And often it's because they are rejected, they are not in community. It's all of the things that we know as African people matter to us.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to be figuring this out by ourselves, which is why we do this in a congregation. We figure this out in a community. We do it in relation with people who can love us and love the most important parts of who we are. And there's a lot that I think gets in the way, especially for folks who want to argue theology and haven't even read the book. But the thing that for me should never get in the way or never be lost is love. Literally, before coming in here to have this conversation with you, I was listening to CeCe Winans. Alabaster Box.
Yeah.
I think it's Luke 7.
Yeah.
A woman who was, by everybody's opinions, a sinner. She wore a scarlet letter.
Right.
And I don't know how you can experience that song, read that scripture, have encountered a Jesus who showed up for the least of these and not feel like you were obligated to show up in love.
Dave, I went a couple of months ago. I had a trunk full of stuff I was trying to get at Goodwill. So I'm trying to find Goodwill. I make a wrong turn. I may have the driver take you by there when we leave. And I ran into this place called Lost and Found. Have you heard of it?
No.
You're going today. Even if I got to get you a later ticket.
Okay.
Lost and Found is a place for young people who have been thrown out of the house because they've come out.
Invited in.
Tell me what that, you got to help me. Tell me what that means.
I appreciate this.
Yes.
Coming out is like nails on a chalkboard for me, in part because it reduces the power that some of us have.
Okay.
So on days like National Coming Out Day, or when people think about coming out, they usually feel like we, queer people, owe them a story about our difference.
Okay.
My reality is I don't owe anybody anything, especially if me sharing a part of who I am might expose me to additional harm. And so very much like you acknowledging that in the Black church, we have a hierarchy of sins, right? If you cheat on your wife, it's a light sin.
Right. But
if you gay, it's a death-worthy sin.
Yeah.
Literally, right? Like inviting in is a way to shift that, which is to acknowledge that all of us have something that this society says we should feel shame around. Our weight, educational status, wealth or lack thereof. And it's a way for me of shifting, which is to say that I don't owe you this information, but if we can do this, if we can dialogue, if we can build, I can trust you enough to share with you a part of what makes me whole. The idea also is that coming out suggested it's a one-time thing, right? This is what happens for white people in Hollywood movies. They sit down with their families. They have a talk that might be difficult, but then everybody shows up in love.
Right.
White queer people move to neighborhoods like Hollywood, California, Chelsea, Chicago. Black folks will come to Atlanta, and then they live their gay life, pun intended. What it misses is that most Black LGBTQIA plus and same-gender loving people, we live with other Black people. We have always been concentrated in the South. It's small, rural, and isolated communities. And so the reality is that we often are forced to choose daily, multiple times a day, whether or not we invite in and share information that can make us more vulnerable.
So at Lost and Found, where young teenagers have attempted to invite in their family, they were thrown out.
Yeah.
They ended up in Atlanta. They're from everywhere. And a large number of them, you would have the data, become a part of human trafficking.
Yeah, especially here.
Yes. So this program pulls them out of human trafficking, teaches them life skills. They take, like people bring stuff like for Goodwill, they sell it, for young people to get tuition. They put them in housing. They give them life skills and educate. You will fall in love with it. I had our church adopt this center over Christmas. And it was just life-changing. But once you get a hold of it, I'm telling you, you're going to be...
No, it sounds necessary. It sounds like a program connected to SNAPCO, which is run by a local leader here named Tony Michelle Williams, that does a job of ensuring that all of us have community, even when it's ripped away from us.
Yeah. I don't even know how I got there. But
programs for us, community, babies being thrown away.
How... would you say either as individual or in your official capacity, does the Black church go about fostering community?
Yeah, I think in threes. And this, I think, is a consequence of being the grandson of a Black Baptist preacher.
Give me my 3 points.
I got 3. You can hold me accountable to them. I think one is doing a part of what we've talked about thus far, and is showing up in love.
Mm-hmm.
It's acknowledging that you should not feel like you need to approve of somebody's life. This is where traditionally folks will say lifestyle, which suggests that it's, again, a choice, which I would argue that it's not. But let's just say life. That there are so many different ways to do this thing, this crazy thing called life. We should disabuse ourselves of the feeling and the responsibility and the weight that we have to know it all. We can't. We won't. And you don't have to understand every aspect of somebody's life to show up in love.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's one. The second is for us to create spaces to engage in difficult conversations, especially with children. Too often, adults forget what it was like to be a child. In this moment, when thinking about the recent passing of the Pope, it has me remembering when I was teaching kindergarten and third grade. And my third graders, after a Pope had died around this time, so this would have been 2005, I experienced children have one of the most sophisticated conversations about life and death than I've ever bared witness to. It was polite. It was respectful. They disagreed. One of my babies said, I think when you die, you become an angel, you go to heaven. Another one said, I don't think that that's true. I love that for you. And I think something different. We get in the way, adults, big babies get in the way and think that we have to wait until a child is ready to have a conversation. Children are always ready. We have to do the work to find the language to communicate to them in a way that they'll understand. So for me, that's the second, is having more conversations like this, and finding comfort in saying, I don't know, but let's figure out the answer together. And then the third thing is to reclaim African ways of being, especially in this moment when there are white nationalists in incredible positions of power. One of the forces I think that they are counting on is that we will isolate, that we will turn away from one another, that we will stop showing up and gathering and drawing strength in community. That is anti-African. That is not how we win. What I know is what Fannie Lou Hamer taught us, which is that none of us are free unless and until all of us are free. We got to go together. And so this is about us linking arms and aims to find ways to bring people back to the church house, and to find ways to tear down the wall so that we don't have to go to a physical place to engage in the kinds of relationships that for me are all bound up in the Jesus that I know and love.
No, that's beautiful. I wanted to ask, what was your thought as a Christian and as a Black man when you saw evidence pronouncedly that evangelicals ran this entire election cycle on 2 issues? On same-sex marriage. Am I saying that right? Okay. On same-sex marriage and abortion. And all of America in a groundswell say, we'll deal with the cost of eggs later. We'll deal with gas later.
Everything
failing
else.
education. Let's just
genocide,
focus. Genocide, warfare, all of that. Tell me from your perch how you read the landscape.
As a student of history and somebody who follows politics, I was not surprised. This is not a new play that they are running. They haven't invented a new playbook. They are continuing to do the same things. We saw within the last decade white evangelicals using leaders within Black faith traditions to divide and conquer around then gay marriage. Right? So I should name that my body recalled being in what was my church home, an A&M church. I'm struggling whether or not I should name it at this moment.
What is A&M?
AME, sorry.
You're AME.
Colleges. The last church I took the disciple, I became AME.
Really?
However, my pastor, who I love and appreciated, started to preach against my ability to love myself.
Wow.
And I was not going to tithe into my own oppression. And so there's a pastor sitting next to you in this chair, and I'm that baby in that pew. It's still something that vexes me. And what I know is that they were unsuccessful in attempting to block the ability for legislation to be passed in order for same-sex marriages to be permissible.
Yes.
But they took those same strategies and continued to apply them to abortion. They overturned Roe. They were successful. And they tweaked the anti-gay stuff to target trans folks. And they are seeing extreme success in this moment. I was not surprised again because this has happened. I was saddened by the fact that we continue to fall for it.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question that I'm sure you've been asked a million times. Is white evangelicals a lot of times trumpet that you are Christian before you are Black? I wanted to ask you, which are you confronted with first? And I hope I'm wording it correctly.
Yeah.
Being Black or being same gender love?
I reject the premise of the question.
Okay, reject
I
it.
think even the positing of the question reinforces all of the worst parts of whiteness. Because if you are a white man, you never have to choose.
Ooh.
You're always in a position of power.
Ooh.
The further away you move from being a white man, and let's go back to the origins of the term, to be a man in this country meant that you were white, straight,
yes,
married,
yes,
Protestant, and land owning. There were conditions to this.
Yes.
If you weren't any of those things, you didn't have the same rights as a designated man did. And what I know is that not only do I feel like I am unable to choose, I'm not doing that work for nobody else. You got to take all of me.
Yeah.
And this is what I know is one of the challenges. White mediocrity suggests that we pick and choose, not only within ourselves, but within our community. There's so much diversity. Again, everything that exists now started in Africa. And I want us to remember, let's reclaim African ways of being. There are countries that you can go to right now where they don't have gender pronouns, where he and she don't exist. Sambufu Some, one of my favorite writers, wrote a book called The Spirit of Intimacy. Chapter 13 of the book is titled Homosexuality, the Gatekeepers. They write, in my village in West Africa, the words lesbian and gay did not exist, but the word gatekeeper did. More importantly for me, they go on to say, gatekeepers hold the space between our community, the village, and our ancestors. In most spaces, whether it's Tahiti, Turtle Island, or Hawaii, Native indigenous spaces, understand that queer people are sacred. You don't get closer to freedom without having to go through us. It is why you can't talk about civil rights in this country without naming Bayard Rustin, a Black gay man who got his tooth knocked out, protesting, standing up for righteousness. He was a Quaker who understood that this is about us all celebrating and acknowledging our humanity. Marsha paying no mind Johnson. The P paying no mind was, why you all up in my business?
Don't go too fast. I got to pause right here.
Okay.
I got to pause right here because you got...
See, I'm about to get excited.
No. But I want to drop it because I don't want to go on presumed knowledge.
Okay.
I need you all to know that Bayard Rustin was the genius behind Dr. King.
Yes, and if I can push you, when you think of him, this is going to make some people uncomfortable. When you think of his name, think bi like bisexual. It's spelled like Bay, like the Bay, but it's Bayard Rustin. And beyond that, we would not have nonviolent civil protests if it were not for Bayard Rustin. He studied nonviolent civil protests internationally at the feet of monks and then brought that back here. He was not only Dr. King's confidant, he was a speechwriter, served as a godfather to his children, a friend to Coretta. And to a part of our earlier conversation, it was Black folks in the movement who wanted to sideline him and get him out of the way, who sold him out. Go to June, Pride Month. People forget that because it's usually skinny white boys and rainbows and unicorns, right? Stuff I don't like. They not like us. We would not have Pride if it were not for a Black woman, a Black trans woman named Marsha P. Johnson. Trans wasn't the term at the time. She would have called herself a drag performer. There's a whole nother conversation there around the evolution of terms and language, but Marsha paid no mind Johnson. The P was because people would ask her, who are you? And she was like, I pay that no mind. Why are you, if you're not loving on me, why are you concerned about some things that actually shouldn't concern you? And this is a Black woman who was a sex worker, who organized community, started an organization called STAR to make sure that children who were cast away had access to stable housing, to the medical services that they need. We've always shown up in these roles. And if we don't find ways to reject the things that whiteness continues to push upon us and reclaim African ways of being, we will die under the weight of the system that is designed to benefit them. This is when Brian Stevenson says systems work exactly as designed. This goes back to me saying that I refuse to do the work of trying to separate important parts of what make me whole.
I need you to do a quick remedial class. I have a doctorate degree, but I also have a GED. Help me translate. Yes, translate for me. What is transgender?
Yep. So, yep. In the purest sense of the term, doctors make guesses at what gender is going to be at birth, right? Which is why people still engage in this arcane practice of gender reveals. Doctors are using every tool that they have, right? They're assessing chromosomes and makeup through the lens of biology, which is more of a social construct. The two things get mixed together. And they typically say that this child will likely be a boy, this child will likely be a girl. There's a small percentage of times where you cannot make a determination based on scientific principles. And so that baby might be intersex. If you, as a person growing up and developing, identify with the gender that the doctor assigned to you, you are cisgendered. CIS, not cis. You're cisgendered.
Tell me what that is.
It simply means that your gender identity is consistent with the gender identity that a doctor assigned to you.
Okay.
If that is not true for you, if my identity is different than what a doctor said it was going to be, you're trans. In a pure sense, that's what it means.
I got it.
We often get tripped up and start to think about sex and genitalia and stuff that generally is not somebody's concern unless you're trying to love up on somebody.
Right.
But this is literally about gender as it was assigned at birth, which is why you see this current administration trying to limit gender to that which a doctor assigned without regard for how one experiences life, how they've engaged in development, how they themselves see themselves in the mirror and wake up in the morning.
Okay, let me ask you this. I'm going to come back full circle because there's a whole lot of paint being thrown on the wall and people are finger paint. So
this is why we need to go back to kindergarten. You got the right one. Let's go.
I need you to explain to me, because I don't think people really understand what is happening then with the administration on this ID, on that you can't get a passport unless it matches what your birth certificate says. What is the real
gender assigned at birth?
Yes,
that's exactly where we are.
Okay.
Yeah, let me be clear because this administration likes to be litigious.
Yes.
That I'm speaking in my personal capacity, not in the capacity of someone who leads an organization with the C3. And while some might laugh at this moment, this is real.
Okay.
This administration is doing two things that I want everyone to be clear about. They are weaponizing government to take resources from organizations that are trying to fill gaps, that are trying to defend democracy, that are trying to ensure that we have access to the democratic institutions, systems of public education, public health, institutes and facilities. They are trying to limit that by denying our ability to do good work, while at the same time you have really wealthy, mostly white, sometimes South African oligarchs who are making more money getting billions of dollars in government contracts or welfare. And a part of how they're getting away with this is by attempting to distract us. And so the distractions come in the form of, let me blame everything on somebody else, right? If you were an American and you were concerned about the economy, it's because those illegals are stealing your jobs.
Yeah.
If you are an American and you're concerned about not having access to things that would make you more comfortable socially, it's because trans folks are taking all of your benefits. And while we're arguing over pronouns and generally what people refer to as like 1% of the population, they are looting our data. They are destroying systems of accountability. They are literally destroying institutions that have made our country what it is. Specific to forms of identification, what this administration is trying to do is to legislate genocide.
Wow.
And this didn't start in November or January. Let's go back to the most recent election cycle and let's go to a neighboring state of Florida, where the failed history teacher turned governor, Ronald DeSantis, test drove all of this. He passed a bill called Stop Woke, which prevented funding for the state of Florida to go to support DEI programs, which is the second iteration of affirmative action, which has over time disproportionately benefited white women.
Yeah.
And we're now seeing it benefit mediocre white men.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What point was I making? White men, DEI, affirmative action, legislative genocide. So that was Stop Woke. The second bill was Don't Say Gay. Teachers, public officials can't use words that affirm that some of us are LGBTQIA plus or same gender. I could be fired if I were teaching in Florida and had a picture of my partner on my desk.
No
This
way.
is after a federal bill that said you actually can't do that because it is illegal with regard to employment discrimination. In the state of Florida, they also weaponized and provided bounty for neighbors to turn in their neighbors if they were found to be providing health care to their children. A part of the distraction is they've termed it gender affirming care. It's just health care.
Mm-hmm.
Ain't nobody doing things, right? Like, ain't nobody doing things that they suggest we do. And if you push on the data, you'll see that. And so all of this in this moment is about restricting people's ability to access life-saving and sometimes life-affirming resources, restrict mobility.
Yeah.
Right. The reality is that there's not a single state you can go to in this country where there has not been an anti-Black or anti-LGBTQ bill either introduced or codified. It just doesn't exist. The last legislative cycle was one of the deadliest on record. And their goal is to encourage people to accept the lie that they are not worthy of living, that they are not worthy of joy, that they are not worthy of thriving. And again, I want people to appreciate that it is a lie. And if we shift away from deficit-based thinking, all of the worst parts of whiteness, and appreciate, again, we are the progenitors of everything. There's enough for us to create space so that we can all enjoy abundance. If we shift, we can get away from the things that they're doing that are working in their favor in this moment. Did I answer the question?
You did.
Okay. Excellently.
I want you to give a redress because two issues I'd like for you to speak to. One is MAGA Republicans who are touting that touting that the previous administration was paying for transitioning of children in public schools. That's one. Two, what I've not heard in discourse in our community, the danger of what is happening of people being reassigned in the prison system.
Yeah. Let's start with the actually, how do I want to do this?
And maybe I shouldn't have clumped those together.
No,
I'm sorry.
it's all right. We can break things apart and reconfigure them. Three things. I encourage every member of the congregation to read Grifter. I hope I got the title right, but it's a book by Clay Kane, one of our brilliant brothers who does the work of telling the history of how the Republican Party has used Black people over time. Historically, all up and the way through Candace Owens and the rest of they kin. I think that's really important for us in this moment, especially when we should be asking what the benefit is, when so many of us are paying the cost of people selling us out and attempting to get closer to what they see as power without regard for history. In this moment, I want every Black Republican to just remember the name Herman Cain.
Oh, Lord.
That's one part of it. With regard to the federal government is indoctrinating children and trying to change boys into girls, it's a lie. It is a similar lie to, it's a similar lie that is being used to attempt to justify preventing trans women exclusively from being able to participate in sports. Or being able to access bathrooms. So let me work through those backwards. What we know is that in most states that have entertained bathroom bans, attempting to suggest that it's designed to keep women safe, before those bans were instituted, there are very few, if any, accusations of the kind of assault or violence that people are intimating they want to get away from. This is a solution in search of a problem. The problem actually doesn't exist. Similarly, when we think about trans athletes in sports, again, in a world where we should be talking about equity, that nobody's talking about trans men in sports, should lead us to ask some questions or at least think critically. But when we think about trans athletes generally at the collegiate level, NCAA,
Yeah.
if there are roughly 20,000 NCAA athletes
Yeah.
in the country, how many of them do you think are trans?
100?
Fewer than that. It's fewer than that.
Wow.
And what I want most people to remember is that before this became a manufactured problem, schools and colleges and the Olympics and other federations found ways to ensure that people could compete without regard for these manufactured problems or concerns. This is not to say that there are not people like Caitlyn Jenner who exist in the world and who are problematic.
Yes.
Who have all of the things that we are worried about, the privilege associated with being a man, the privileges associated with being a white woman, what feels like the ability to move between those two as they so choose, that is a problem. They are a problematic person, but they should not be reflective of the entire community. And I want us to be able to be more critical in processing all of these things at the same time. Those are two. The third one, what was the third example you asked about? In prisons. This is something that tripped up Kamala Harris in running for vice president, in part because there was not an articulated position on what happened in California, where there were a number of incidents of people who were being held in spaces that were inconsistent with their gender assignment, and it caused complications. This is when I'm going to say, I don't know that I have the expertise to offer the policy solution to remedy that. What I do know is that, one, we should be having more conversations about abolition, acknowledging that prisons don't do the work that we purport that they do.
Yes.
In fact, they simply make wealthy white oligarchs more wealthy. And we should be mindful of ensuring that people are safe, including when they are incarcerated.
I got to ask you this. I'm running out of time. As I knew that I would, I started a little while ago a boycott against Target, and called it a fast to bring back spiritual properties to the movement, because the Black church has not been visible or vocal in collectively. Of course, there are offshoots of individual churches and individual, but the Black church at large really hasn't been on the front line in a generation, I would say, and missed the train, Dr. Johns, at the emergence of Black Lives Matter, which was one of the few or only movements in the Black community that wasn't birthed out of the womb of the Black church, led by a Black leader.
Yeah.
In large measure, it was not supported because Black denominations, Black pastors, Black churches didn't want to follow the lead of sisters. I'm a graduate who were same gender loving.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me a crash course.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so I did the Target fast. There were others who were doing a Target boycott. I did the Target fast to escort the church in to the conversation and to the narrative.
Yep.
How do we, I'm not sure whether we bridge the gap or marry the movements so that we can work in tandem moving forward. We got, in the words of Dr. King, we got some difficult days ahead. And we don't have time to cherry pick. How do you best recommend that the Black church become more encompassing?
This is where Dr. Freeman Rabowski would say we should be
That's my guy.
Not beholden to the tyranny of either or, but be liberated by the beauty of both and. We got to figure out how to do all of it. One of the things that I appreciate about our fraternity, which is this motto is achievement in every field of human endeavor, and what I've experienced in your leadership with the Target Fast, it's also showing up in the State of the People Tour, is an appreciation for the fact that our individual achievements don't really matter if we don't find ways to enrich everybody in our community.
That's great.
Right? This again is Fannie Lou Hamer, none of us are free unless and until all of us are free. So let's all get free together. I believe that there's work to be done in every lane, which means that bringing churches together to operate as a larger community is incredibly important. Finding ways to engage in inside-outside strategies with folks who are embedded in spiritual and faith communities and folks who are not is incredibly important. Finding ways to break down these artificial silos between people who understand a deeper connection to a higher source but might call it something else is also incredibly important. Whatever we need to do to get our folks closer to freedom is what we are called to do in this moment. And I want to lift up in this moment an appreciation for the fact that not only was it an appropriate acknowledgement of the economic pressure that needed to be put on a company that continues to benefit from Black folks in lots of ways, but being intentional in bringing the Black Chamber along so that there was a connection to Black entrepreneurs and businesses. And then thinking about the fact that there's so many of us who have access to these beautiful buildings on a Sunday or a Wednesday, but don't really think about how to turn them into markets that our people can benefit from, is the work that we need to be doing now in this moment, especially while there are, again, extremely wealthy white folks who own lots of things attempting to own even more.
No, thank you. You have educated me today with compassion and with patience.
Happy.
No, really.
Happy
and
to.
I'm
No, I
grateful
appreciate
for it.
you.
And I hope that our viewers are all the more enhanced, impacted, and empowered. The only way you have been able to be able to receive this is with an open mind and an open heart. The beauty of community is finding family, even if you don't find agreement, of how it is that you love, how it is that you move, and how it is that you function.
That's right.
And so I am asking those of you who claim to be Christian to do what Jesus said is the most important. Love your neighbor
Period.
as you love yourself. Go ahead.
Yes,
jump in.
but
Jump in.
this is it though. Usually, I want to flip it
Help
because
me.
our inability to love ourselves is usually what stops us from being able to show love to somebody else. So let
Yes.
me say three things in the spirit of being helpful. One is you don't have to do this work alone.
Yes.
There are organizations like NBJC, nbjc.org. We have resource kits acknowledging that as we've worked through, sometimes people don't have these conversations because they don't have the language.
Yes.
When I took on this role in 2016, the first time the current occupant of the Oval Office made it impossible for me to continue in public service, we hosted a summit around Black lives. And our dear sister, Angela Rye, was on stage talking about the experience of having a cousin, Bridget, who became HIV positive because her fiance was cheating. He was lying and transmitted the virus to her. And Angela, in telling the story, used the phrase full-blown AIDS. And now this is a term that was created by the media to conjure up images about HIV being something that will bubble up and ooze onto you. And there was a brilliant advocate in the audience who said to her with love and patience and clarity, I would love for you to never use that term again. She explained why. She then said that the term I think you're reaching for is stage 3 HIV. That's the final stage of HIV. And Angela said, I got it. I will never use that term again. We know that sometimes us not literally having language means that we don't have this dialogue. And so we have a word matter toolkit around HIV, health and wellness. We have another one around gender justice. Again, let's go back and find these tools. Related to the love piece, I talked about the mental health challenges that so many of our babies face. I need every person who is comfortable taking your problems to God to also find comfort taking them to a certified mental health therapist who requires you to do work outside of the session. If we can heal and deal with Joy DeGruy would say post-traumatic slave syndrome, but we're not post anything. We're being re-traumatized in this moment. But if we don't deal with the trauma, the prolonged exposure to toxic stress, some of us poverty, we can't love ourselves to then do the work of loving somebody else. If you have members of the church, y'all, if you're a Black LGBTQIA+, and you don't have a good therapist, NBJC wants to find one for you. We worked in partnership with Taraji P. Henson's organization to find more than 500 members of our community good, high-quality mental health for free. We at least get people started. And so I just want to make sure that I provide that context for how we can continue to move through together. And I hope that I made some people uncomfortable. I hope that this conversation made people uncomfortable. and I hope that people will sit in the discomfort to find ways to grow in it.
I love you, David, but I'm out of time.
That's a construct. No, let me
Yes,
stop.
I gotta go. I love y'all.
go.
Listen, I hope that this begins communications. I want to challenge you to share this podcast and to show this podcast in your Bible study and make it into a conversation. I pray that you'll be able to have it without debate and without emotion, but to do it with love. I am so grateful that you were open to having this conversation. And this is, I believe, has got to be a first installment. We got to come back after.
Absolutely.
After the candle wick burns.
Let's get through this tour.
Yeah, let's get through the tour.
And get Target to show up and do right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Love y'all. I see you. And try to love yourself so that you can love other people right. God bless you. Let's stay clear. Like, share, and follow.